Now available in paperback and Kindle. Vampires stalk the darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. Victoria Alonso, a longtime executive at Marvel Studios, has allegedly parted ways with the company. Now, according to some reports, Victoria Alonso was terminated from her position working as an executive at Marvel Studios due to the poor performance of Marvel Studios' Phase 4, and the complete flop of Marvel Studios' Phase 5, with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania basically flopping at the box office. And as a result of the complete decline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's looking like Bob Iger is looking to go in a completely different direction with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and as a result, he has decided to let go of Victoria Alonso, who was allegedly the visionary who orchestrated the Marvel Studios Phase 4, and was also responsible for a lot of the poor quality special visual effects. Now, Victoria Alonso had been working at Marvel Studios for over 17 years and started out as the visual effects coordinator as related to the 2008 film Iron Man. And with the success of Iron Man, she graduated to becoming a co-producer on more Marvel Studios films, such as Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, and the first Avenger, and helped shape the first phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which led to the Avengers, which came out in 2012 and became the billion-dollar blockbuster that cemented the Marvel Cinematic Universe as essential viewing for an entire generation of viewers. Unfortunately, over the course of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Victoria Alonso allegedly became extremely egotistical, and as she became egotistical, she began looking to go out here and put her own imprint on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not satisfied with the just adapting Marvel Comics from the source material, she was looking to allegedly promote a social justice agenda in many of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films, and this is where we started to see the films start to change from being films that were very true to the Marvel Comics, starting with Iron Man, Captain America the First Avenger, and Thor and the Incredible Hulk, to us starting to see these films start to deviate from the source material. And that deviation really started with Spider-Man Far From Home, and that's where we started to, not Far From Home, no, from Homecoming. That's where we started to see the deviation from the source material, and that's where we started to see Marvel Studios starting to put identity politics ahead of storytelling, and that was all the fingerprints of Victoria Alonso, who openly came out and started talking more and more about her social justice and identity politics, and made her efforts to promote so-called diversity on screen with Marvel Studios films, even though the Marvel Cinematic Universe was extremely diverse at the time, with lots of representation as related to the content of the characters, because we had characters of all different races and ethnicities in early Marvel Studios films. But instead of focusing on the quality of the stories, what Victoria Alonso allegedly wanted to focus on was promoting more social justice in Marvel Studios films, and this led to a serious decline in quality with Marvel Studios films, starting with Phase 4, where Marvel Studios really started to walk away from just adapting Marvel Comics to going out here and looking to adapt the agendas and narratives that were promoted as part of the all-new, all-different Marvel, a group of franchises that basically failed in the comics, and Victoria Alonso wanted to walk away from the traditional Marvel Comics and wanted to go out here and push the agenda of the all-new, all-different Marvel inside of Marvel Studios projects. And we started to see more of that fingerprint with films like Captain Marvel, and later on into Phase 4, as Victoria Alonso greenlit lots of different projects that promoted so-called diversity, like with the Shang-Chi movie, with the Eternals movie, and with the Kamala Khan Ms. Marvel series. And as Phase 4 went on to go on for the last couple of years, Phase 4 has not performed as well as the first three phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And as Phase 4 underperformed at the box office, with many of the movies just not becoming hits, like Eternals, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Mediocrity, and Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and many of the Disney Plus projects that Victoria Alonso approved not performing well, what happened was Disney started to take a critical look at the poor performance of Phase 4, and they started to realize that there was one common denominator as related to the poor performance, and that poor performance was basically Victoria Alonso's incompetent leadership. Because under Victoria Alonso's incompetent leadership, Marvel Studios projects went from being true to the game adaptations straight out of the comics to these deviations with a heavy focus on identity politics and preventing images of so-called strong women. And these so-called strong women were oftentimes presented in a bait-and-switch manner in many Marvel Studios films, like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Mediocrity, which was sold as a Doctor Strange film. However, that film's main focus was on using America Chavez as a plot device and making the Scarlet Witch the center focus of a movie that she was not strong enough to carry. And this was also done with many other films as related to Phase 4, where they would go out here like with Thor, Love and Thunder. Instead of giving us a movie about the Odin son, Thor, we were baited in with Thor, but then switched up with Jane Foster, Mighty Thor. And this movie was one of the worst movies that the MCU ever produced, and it was a precursor to the complete collapse of Phase 4, which was the underperformance of Wakanda Forever, another film which is all about promoting so-called strong women at the expense of the male lead characters. Now, this whole promotion of so-called strong women, this was not something that appealed to the core male audience of comic fans, who were the ones who were spending most of the money to go see many of these movies. But that didn't mean anything to Victoria Alonso, who put her own personal agendas over the interest of the audience. Because with Victoria Alonso, it was all about promoting her own identity politics and her own agendas. And she was willing to go as far as saying, oh, the X-Men, one of the most popular franchises in Marvel's history, should not be called X-Men, and wanted to go out here and change the name of the X-Men because it was associated with men overall. And again, these types of statements from Victoria Alonso and her whole decisions to go out here and try to reshape the Marvel Cinematic Universe is what derailed the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a brand. And Victoria Alonso was so busy focusing on identity politics and social justice that she really wasn't paying attention to the projects she was putting on the screen, because Victoria Alonso was supposed to be the one in charge of all of the visual effects, and sadly all of those visual effects went into a serious state of decline, to the point where a lot of the visual effects, which were one of the core elements of Marvel Studios films, was on the level of maybe some of these old PS1 games. I mean, some of the special effects in some of these MCU TV series or Disney Plus series were just absolutely awful. For example, the She-Hulk CGI was so bad, many people were comparing it to the 2001 movie Shrek Princess Fiona, and many were looking at much of the visual effects and how sloppy and unfinished they were, and how they were of just absolutely poor quality. Now, things came to a head with Phase 5, with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, a film that was primarily filmed with mostly CGI, and a lot of it was so absolutely terrible that it just destroyed any sort of ability to escape into the world that was being created as related to the quantum realm. Now, the worst form of special effects seen was the MODOK character, who again was another deviation from the source material, and this MODOK was so bad that it looked like something out of a PS1 game or the movie Shark Boy and Lava Girl, which had a much smaller budget, and that was an embarrassment because this movie, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, basically cost over $200 million, and we didn't see any of that on the screen as related to the visual effects that were really rushed for this film. Now, in addition to just producing poor visual effects, it was alleged that Victoria Alonso threatened a lot of VFX coordinators and made their lives a living hell. And as she did this, this led to many visual effects coordinators not even wanting to go out here and do Marvel projects, which further alienated Disney's Marvel Studios from visual effects producers because they were so overwhelmed and so overburdened by so many multiple Marvel Studios projects that many of these individuals didn't even have time to go out here and even breathe because they were so busy being inundated with these projects, and these projects were forced out here and rushed because Victoria Alonso wanted to push her social justice agenda regardless of caring about any of the people that she was working for. And as a result, she rushed out a lot of poor quality projects, and these poor quality projects have led to the decline of Marvel Studios as a brand, and it handed Marvel Studios its first flop with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And with this first flop of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, what has happened to Marvel Studios is their brand has suffered a lot of damage, and in an effort to try to salvage that damage after this first major flop with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which led to the collapse of Phase 5, what has happened is that we now possibly have Bob Iger stepping in, and as Bob Iger has stepped in, it looks like he's looking to terminate Victoria Alonso in an effort to try to save the Marvel Studios brand from the years of catastrophic damage created under her incompetent leadership. Because, again, it was allegedly Victoria Alonso who was the one who demanded that Marvel Studios go off the road of Bronze Age Marvel Comics and action and adventure with towards the end of Phase 3, and she was the one who instrumented the whole platform of Phase 4 after Avengers Endgame, where instead of us focusing on core Marvel heroes like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and the Hulk, we started to focus on secondary and tertiary heroes in the backgrounds like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, trying to make Falcon into Captain America, looking to go out here and push the whole strong woman thing with Ms. Marvel and She-Hulk, and failing miserably because, again, these were not mainline characters that people grew up and connected with and saw as friends. No, these were like second and tertiary background characters, and with a lot of other characters like Kamala Khan, Ms. Marvel, and many others that they tried to push, they just did not get over. And a lot of them just didn't get over because they were just poorly done characters. But it was all about representation for Victoria Alonso, and because she was so focused on representation without any sort of substance, this again was one of the reasons why the MCU went from must-see movies and must-see TV shows to passable shows that people passed on watching because people wanted to be entertained. They didn't want to be preached to, and they didn't want to be preached to by a tyrannical woman who looked to go out here and try to bully people into seeing her version of Marvel superheroes, and her version of Marvel superheroes just wasn't anything anybody wanted to see because she wanted to walk away and again deviate from the source material, telling us that the X-Men can't be the X-Men, telling us that, oh, we need to have more representation of strong women when there were already strong women in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like the Black Widow and the Wasp and Scarlet Witch. However, Victoria Alonso wanted to minimize those characters because they were created by men, and because they didn't have her fingerprint on them, they just weren't strong enough for her. So she decided to go out here and create her own take on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and audiences weren't really interested in her take on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which was a very sloppy and half-done job because she was too busy arguing with Ron DeSantis over the Don't Say alphabet legislation and going back and forth with him, and instead of focusing on her job. Victoria Alonso was too caught up in identity politics and political issues, or instead of focusing on the visual effects at Marvel Studios, and she oftentimes focused on a high quantity of products to overcompensate for her poor ability to produce quality stories, hoping that after making a lot of projects, people would be distracted by the sheer number of projects, that they wouldn't see the poor quality as related to them. However, people saw the poor quality in the quantity of projects that Victoria Alonso produced, and as they saw the poor quality of the quantity of products that she produced, this is what led to many to look at Marvel Studios projects as just bad quality, and eventually it all caught up with her with the flop of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and this is possibly why Bob Iger wants to go in a new direction with a new person, because after 17 years of Victoria Alonso, he's looking to try to salvage the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but I don't think he's able to salvage the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point. And the reason why I don't believe he'll be able to salvage the Marvel Cinematic Universe is because the audience has basically been burnt out at this point because of the oversaturation of product that Victoria Alonso put in the marketplace. And with that oversaturation of product in the marketplace, the audience has basically been overwhelmed, and they're just burnt out on superhero projects at this point. Because I'm noticing a trend as related to the box office of superhero movies over the last couple of years, and it's looking to me like the audience is burning out on the genre overall. I look at the flop of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and the flop of Shazam: Fury of the Gods, and it's showing me that the trend of the superhero movie has basically burnt itself out at this point, and the audience is just tired of seeing superheroes at this point, and they're looking for something different. And this is where Marvel Studios is in a lot of trouble, because now they're in a place where superheroes are no longer in vogue, and it was superhero movies that kept comics afloat. So this could be a catastrophic disaster for comics and superheroes, because people just, again, are burnt out on these characters. They've seen so many of these stories. They've come off like an assembly line, and there's nothing special about them at this point. So I don't think Bob Iger can salvage things at this point. He might have been thinking, oh, I'll get rid of Victoria Alonso and hold her accountable for all of these failures, but the damage is done, and the damage is done at this point as related to the entire genre of superhero movies, because once you inundate an audience with so much product, the audience gets tired of that product, and they want to move on to something else, and audiences are moving on to other projects that are profitable, like Cocaine Bear, Creed 3, and other movies, and that's where the audience is going. And sadly, that's why Disney is in a major serious situation. And firing Victoria Alonso again, it may make Bob Iger feel good, but he's still on a sinking ship, and that ship is sinking because the people like Victoria Alonso were too busy focused on identity politics and social justice, instead of just focusing on making good movies and making sure that the box office for those movies would do well. And because they weren't focused on just making good stories, the story might be, we might not only be seeing the end of the superhero movie genre, we might also be seeing the end of Marvel Studios, and we might also be seeing the end of Disney, a company that's on the brink as related to decline, and a company that's nearly on the same road of bankruptcy it was in the 1970s, because A lot of their executives, like Victoria Alonso, took their position for granted, abused the customer, and then abused many of the people as they were on these productions, and has produced a lot of garbage movies that led to the entire collapse of the superhero movie genre, because that's what Victoria Alonso orchestrated after 17 years on the job, where she had stayed too long, and staying too long, she basically ran the superhero movie genre at Marvel Studios into the ground. And I don't think they're going to be able to come back from this because, again, at this point, the audience wants something different, and I don't think that Marvel Studios is going to be able to bring something different for Fail 5, which started off on a bad foot, and is still struggling as related to many of its projects. And I don't think they're going to be able to fix it for a Phase 6 or Fail 6, because at this point, people are so burnt out on superheroes, they're not really interested in seeing a Fantastic Four or an X-Men, because they're just tired of the entire genre overall at this point. Now, if you want to pick up some of my action-packed fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and even Walmart and Target. And if you want to see me make more videos about comics, superheroes, and fantasy and science fiction, you can send a donation to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App, and I use that money to go out here and pay for fantastic covers like the ones you see on the ISIS series and the E-Steam series and the John Haynes series, and also to pay for great comics like the John Haynes at Death's Door, which you can pick up a paper copy on Lulu. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Bride of Dracula, Goddess Next Door, and John Haynes team up to take on the Dark Vampire Lord with this action-packed ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Now available on Lulu, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at Lulu.com today.